At its core, it's about building and developing a partnership between Botswana and the UK, a partnership that's based on mutual respect, equality, and a partnership that delivers for the interests of Botswana and the interests of the UK.
Don't you ever wonder what embassies do? Don't you always wonder what foreign relations are? Today, we're just going to unpack what does an embassy do? What does a high commissioner do? And I think we've got just the right person today. His Excellency Giles Enticknap. I got it right? Welcome, man.
Thanks so much. Yeah. A diplomat is a bridge between two countries, between institutions, a bridge of understanding. You can only make progress in any field based on a fundamental understanding of each other's positions, where you're from, why you think. In many countries around the world where they're not as privileged to have the environment that Botswana has, a lot of the work is trying to avoid conflict and often working in dangerous places.
The level of inequality in Botswana has troubled me for many years. I've raised it with authorities with not much traction. There doesn't seem to be an urgency even from development partners. They gave me quite a diplomatic response as well.
Botswana is caught in what they term a kind of upper middle income trap. You know, what that means is your GDP per capita is higher than South Africa. So on paper, very rich country, but on the ground, the difference between the rich and the poor is extreme. Because Botswana is an upper middle income country, it doesn't have significant amounts of what we call overseas development assistance available to it.
Welcome to the Growth Well podcast, where we tap into a well of knowledge, innovation, and leadership to fuel Africa's growth. Here, we explore thought-provoking insights and expert knowledge that empower individuals and businesses to thrive across the continent. Whether it's personal development or professional advancement, our conversations inspire action and impact. This is Growth Well, where ideas flow and growth begins. Let's dive in.
Okay, welcome to Growth Well Podcasts and the podcast that impacts lives. We are here today, very unique topic. You'll never have thought about it. Don't you ever wonder what embassies do? Don't you always wonder what foreign relations are? As Botswana, obviously, we've got all these foreign missions across the world. But today, we're just going to unpack what does an embassy do? What does a high commissioner do? And I think we've got just the right person today to unpack this for us and discuss so that it's clearer in terms of what their role is. So we have today His Excellency Giles Enticknap. I got it right? Welcome, man.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this. As I said, this is very unique and I'm sure the listeners will be quite thrilled to have such a different topic. We never even thought we'll have a topic like this. But when I internalized it, I was like, actually, this is very unique because I also wonder what they do. And at school, nobody talks about a career in international relations or being a diplomat and stuff like that. So it's very, very exciting, and I'm really looking forward to the discussion.
Wonderful.
Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. K. It's great to be on your podcast and excited to be here too.
Great stuff, man. We usually start on a light note, Giles. And on a lighter note, I usually talk about things like, how to have a grand, happier life and well-being and that type of stuff. So since you have been in Botswana, is it 7 months now?
That's right.
Yeah, and I know that you quite well travel, but what have you picked in Botswana that's a bit unique in terms of interesting or something quite beautiful about this country that you found in your short stay? Yeah. Or is it too early?
No, I mean, there's many things that are beautiful and have struck me, but maybe two things which are sort of different ends of the spectrum.
Okay.
One is on a very simple level, but I think it's beautiful, particularly in terms of being present, is greetings.
Okay.
In your country, everyone greets everyone.
Yeah.
No matter what their stature in sort of economics or society, and I find that beautiful and very present. Whether it's, I was running this morning out on the roads at 5:30 and greeting people as you're passing them in the morning. I've been struck when very senior senior ministers have come to visit us at the house, and they greet our domestic team in the same way they greet me, and I think that's wonderful. And I think that's something which I've really enjoyed and actually take heart, because if you travel on the London Tube, you may not experience that same that same warmth of greeting at every moment. And the second thing, and this is obvious, isn't it? But it's the landscape. But it's not just the landscape; it's the way in which your country, Botswana, has protected its landscape. And I think we can learn a lot from Botswana. Whether it's in the small town that I'm from, in terms of how we look after our own streets, or whether it's on a sort of macro scale in terms of the world learning from Botswana how to protect our ecosystems. I've had the privilege of going up into the Delta. And saw that, and it's
amazing.
It's
stunning,
it's sensational.
It is.
So I think we've got a lot to learn from Botswana on how we conserve our planet, and that's something I hope I can bring back to the UK.
I just like to visit your observation as well. Do you pick that sometimes we don't realize what we have? I mean, this issue of greeting. As I told you earlier, I started in the UK. I've experienced that thing of guys, especially in winter, everyone just passes.
Head down, right? More past. Exactly.
At best they'll say, "All right, mate, let's go past." So and it hit me when I was there, because as you said, here we greet and people are in the present, and you actually ask how are you today? People actually still seem quite concerned, and this is, but unfortunately we tend to copy you guys. We tend to go with the line of the westernization as the in, and then we're losing a bit of that. But if you pick that, maybe we're not sort of really taking it at heart to say this is something we should protect. And have you picked anything like that we take it for granted, in other words?
So I haven't. Because
maybe it's a bit early for you,
I think, as I've only been here 8 months, and is it Boto, if I'm pronouncing it right?
That from an African perspective, it's Ubuntu, Boto.
That sense of is I am, we are.
That's correct.
Culture, which again is I find very very strong here and comes out strongly. But I think you're right. I mean, look, it's part of the human condition. One of the sort of weaknesses of the human condition that we take things for granted when they're right in front of us. But it's not something I've observed yet.
Yeah. Okay. So Giles, before we get into the topic itself, I'd just like for the viewers to really appreciate who you are from a peasant perspective. Just in short, who is Giles?
Who is Giles?
Yeah.
Well, Giles is a father, a husband, a son, someone who enjoys getting the best out of people, someone who enjoys connection, and someone that brings that enjoyment of creating connection with people into a profession that is at its core about understanding. And I think you hold all of those roles. Often people ask, what do you do? The first question. Growing up, my mother taught me a very strong lesson, which I try. Difficult to do in a podcast like this, but I try to stick to, which is she said, Giles, as long as possible, don't ask someone what they do, because the moment you ask someone what they do, the society and the way you've been brought up, you will have all sorts of value judgments.
That's correct.
They say they're a president, or they say they're
a lawyer, and he's that too.
A road sweeper. You will make judgments. She says, try as much as possible to understand who the person is, not what the person does. And if you can do that, walk through life, you'll be a better man. So always try and do that. Because sometimes when you say who are you, it's I'm a high commissioner. But actually, that's
not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for who is Giles.
That's a privilege. That's a role I'm privileged to do at the moment.
It's a station.
But I'm someone who enjoys human connection. I'm an eternal optimist at heart. I think sometimes you have to be doing the job of a diplomat, and I enjoy connecting people and connecting with people and getting underneath the surface a little bit.
And are you here with your whole family?
I'm here with my wife and my daughter and our large golden retriever as well.
Okay,
very much part of the family.
And in the UK, which part of the UK are you from?
I'm from Oxfordshire.
Oxfordshire, okay.
A small town called Tame.
All right.
Not far from London.
All right. That's I was in Southampton. That's where I I studied, spent 4 years there in Southampton, about an hour from London. So it was quite ideal because London is bloody expensive, man.
It is.
So it's good to just come in and get out as soon as you run out of the pounds.
And Southampton is a wonderful, wonderful city. People, of course, we're an island, but people don't think of the UK for beaches.
Correct.
Because there's only about 3 days a year you can actually go on a beach and enjoy enjoy the sunshine. But of course, there's we have deep connection with Botswana on the educational front.
Correct.
Because every meeting or event I go to, I meet someone. I was at Southampton.
I was in Leeds.
I was in Leeds. I was at Edinburgh. I was at Manchester. Which has been very nice since I arrived. So feeling those connections and hearing about those personal experiences.
Excellent. And in stations, I mean, I went through your profile. You've been around the block a little bit, from Kabul to just briefly which stations you've been. And
yeah, of course. Well, briefly, I started my career in Malawi with the UN.
Okay.
I fell into that somehow by accident. And to the sort of to your listeners, to the sort of point of this podcast, I had no idea what international development was, what a diplomat was. I sort of fell into this role in Malawi by accident, working for the UN World Food Programme on a school feeding program. And I met these individuals and thought, gosh, isn't this an interesting way to understand and to see the world? I'd quite like to do that. So from there, I finished university. I studied classics. So classical archaeology and classical history, Greek and Roman times, 5th and 6th century BC, which was fascinating and tells you a lot about the human condition. From there, I went to London, and then I spent 3 years in the DRC, quite a lot of time in Goma, which is in the news a lot at the moment. And then from there, I went to Afghanistan. From Afghanistan, I went to
Kabul.
Kabul, I was in Kabul, and then I went to Mauritania. I was in Nouakchott for a couple of years. And then from there I went to Zimbabwe, back to London, and then back to Zimbabwe. It's a country that I'm very, very fond of. I managed to serve there for both the European Union and also the British Foreign Service. And now I have the privilege of finding myself in Botswana, which is fantastic.
Yeah. Just another, do you guys decide where you want to be stationed, or someone just says, next?
No, so it used to be.
Because I was just curious to say you're just in Harare. Obviously now, recently you're in the UK, you're in London, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah, I was in London.
At the main office. And then you came back. And how's the decision made in terms of your station?
So you used to just get a letter in the post.
Oh, okay.
Saying, congratulations, you're going here.
Yeah.
And then you have to sort of quickly, I think in those days, you had to quickly sort of get the atlas out and work out where it is you've been sent. But now it's like many other things. This is sort of an open field, so you have to apply.
Oh,
and you go through every single job. You have to go through an interview process, application process. So you have a decision in where you'd like to apply for, but obviously it's up for the boards to decide where you go.
Okay.
But I was very pleased to come back to this region.
Yeah. Okay. Talking about foreign relations and diplomat, and just broadly, for our listeners to appreciate what is a diplomat and what do they do before we get into the functions of the offices. Yeah. What is a diplomat? We always feel, one of the things that worried me coming here is like, she's just going to be trying to be diplomatic. Because, that's a perception. And
Yeah, well, I could say a diplomat is someone who never answers the question. But at its core, a diplomat is a bridge between two countries, between institutions, a bridge of understanding. It's our job to bring the understanding from the UK here, to explain it, to find areas of mutual cooperation and interest, and it's also our job to understand the country you're stationed in, and to build that understanding. I'm a firm believer that you can only make progress in any field based on a fundamental understanding of each other's positions, where you're from, why you think, what you think, the history behind those policies, those positions. So really, there's lots of detail in what diplomats do, lots of different types of roles. But at its core, it's first and foremost about understanding because that is the foundation of then building partnership. It's about understanding and building partnership. Certainly in a country like Botswana.
Yeah, and I see it's actually quite, so to speak, a very ancient type industry. Going back in history, I see that even the Roman Empire had sort of embassies. Obviously, it had territory all over in Asia and Africa, and they had embassies. But the Brits, during in the 19th century, they started establishing really formal offices, like in the States, where you were also a colonizer there, so to speak. So it looks like it's got quite a historical perspective to it. It's not sort of a new thing. We always think it's like something that was just cooked up the other day, but it's very historic.
That's absolutely. It's got deep historical roots, and I think that's because as we develop and as we grow as in our respective countries, the value on understanding to avoid conflict between nations is really important. If you think about, to your listeners, if you think about conflicts in your own life, in a personal life, where is the origin often of most of that conflict? I would offer up that it's from misunderstanding, not understanding what someone's done or why, or misunderstanding
where they're coming from,
because why a certain person has reacted a certain way. So just on a very personal level, if you sort of move up the pyramid on that, our role is about helping to ensure that we understand each other, and that takes time, that takes expertise. But at its root, it's about understanding. So the more you understand, the more you can achieve together in partnership.
The way you are positioning is like, it's a very noble thing in terms of being a diplomat. But I just want us now to compare the nobleness of it and the perceptions. I mean, as I told you, when my wife was stationed in Addis, there were always these invitations and cocktail parties, and and then we also touched before the podcast that how sometimes failed politicians get to be, positioned as stations as a payback. This has actually happened here in Botswana. I gave you an example of Alan Patton, who lost the Bath elections in the 90s, and he ultimately became was it a governor of Hong Kong? I forgot what the name is. That then becomes the public perception. So can you talk about that in terms of the gap between the noble and the perception, and on behalf of your comrades? Just
I think there's. It is a profession industry that is perhaps not well understood. There is certainly in the UK this sort of misperception that diplomats are often characterised as sort of swanning around, having a drink and a canapé at a reception party, and that's all they do. Of course, that's one tiny part of it, because of course building networks.
Yeah, that's true.
Is a key part of our job. One of the things I always say to my team is that I want to meet people that the High Commission haven't met before. I want to expand our network, be continually expanding the network, because what can sometimes happen in these environments is, to use your example of Addis, I suspect you saw the same people over and over again.
Yeah, very much. Yeah,
there's a risk there, because you risk everyone speaking to the same people, and you get a groupthink and it can have a sort of chain reaction. So one of the important things that I'm trying to do here, and this is actually sort of invitation to your listeners, if you like, is who are we not speaking to, and who should we be speaking to to understand Botswana, to understand the direction of travel, and how the UK-Botswana partnership can deepen. But I'm being a diplomat, and I'm not answering your questions.
Exactly.
So the noble. Well, I'll let you and your listeners judge whether it's noble. I think the noble element of it is, in many countries around the world where they're not as privileged to have the environment that Botswana has, a lot of the work is trying to avoid conflict and to find peace and work through very, very difficult issues. There is great nobility in that, and often working in dangerous places. People taking personal risks. To work in places and work on issues that are are difficult, that often aren't black and white.
Yeah.
To find ways through. It's often, like threading a needle is how some people can describe diplomacy. Working in, working on very difficult issues. But I think, to shift that misperception, it's about people understanding what it is you actually do. Another area where is perhaps more in the public domain is what we call sort of consular assistance.
Okay.
And what consular assistance is that means, so it'll be the same for Botswana, but for the UK, when a British national travels abroad, if they get in trouble, the UK has what's called consular assistance, which is our ability to support British nationals when they get in trouble overseas, in difficulty.
Okay.
And that can range from a whole host of things to tragedy. So when national disasters, natural disasters happen, or terrorist attacks, or just accidents, providing support to British nationals overseas. Also things, as kind of basic as someone loses their passport.
It's just simple as that.
Helping them get home. During COVID, of course, that was a big consular issue, where there were what we called repatriation flights, getting Brits who were stranded in various countries, getting them home. So that's an area that's often more public facing, where the sort of face of diplomats will be seen, responding to a disaster, responding to issues of sort of national emergency.
But you wouldn't violently dispute the fact that you're generally seen as, I like what you're saying, you got to be accessible, and if you want to understand the country, you got to open up. But we've always seen your offices as a little bit aloof, for lack of a better word. And do you think you got a responsibility with your colleagues to try and break that perception?
Yeah, 100%. And there's many ways of doing that. And then one is having a diplomatic service that represents the UK. I'm very proud to come from a very multicultural, diverse country. We're doing better on that, but we need to continue to be better to make sure that we have a diplomatic service that truly represents our country in terms of background, in terms of physical ability, in terms of underrepresented groups, and there's a lot of progress being made there, but I think still more to be made.
Yeah.
Because it's important that we walk the talk.
Yep.
And you're absolutely right that in the past the diplomatic service was seen as something that was reserved for the kind of higher echelons of society.
Yeah.
But that's not what I see with my colleagues. I've got a really diverse range of brilliant colleagues from all over the UK, from all sorts of backgrounds. And diversity and inclusion are important because that's the sort of society we are in the UK, and that's the sort of society we want to continue to build. But from an operational standpoint, it's also just better. It gets to better outcomes. If you've got, a range of diverse thoughts, whatever your problem is or your issue you're working on, you're going to end up with a better solution.
Sure.
If you've got people who've got different backgrounds, different perspectives,
diversity,
and that diversity of thought, which comes from diversity of background and diversity of upbringing and diversity of sort of how each individual finds themselves in the world, genuinely, I believe, leads to better outcomes. So I think it's part of my responsibility to try and change that.
Whatever,
exactly.
Yeah. Excellent. Giles, now as the High Commissioner to Botswana, quite some months now. So if you can just assist us in terms of what is the mission of the British High Commission in Botswana? What do you do, and what are the objectives of the body corporate, so to speak?
So let me start big and then get into the detail. We can go into as much detail as you want on some of the things I say. But as I said, at its core, it's about building and developing a partnership between Botswana and the UK. A partnership that's based on mutual respect, a partnership that's based on equality, and a partnership that delivers for the interests of Botswana and the interests of the UK. So at the kind of meta level, my job is to use the resources that I've got to develop that partnership in a way that is both beneficial to Botswana and beneficial to the UK. All partnerships are fluid and dynamic, so they're changing all the time. They change with governments, they change with politics, but at its core, it's about finding something that's a win-win situation for both of our countries. We're lucky in the sense that at the moment, and I think I don't see any reason why this would change in the future, that our priorities of my government and the government here of mutual economic growth very much align. His Excellency the President speaks about this every week, about the need for economic diversification, the need to create jobs, the need for economic growth, and that's very much priorities in the UK. So our activity here, if you like, is broadly in three categories. Okay. I'll just set those out briefly. One is this issue of delivering mutual economic growth. What does that mean? That's about increasing trade and investment. That's about deepening science and innovation partnerships. I came this morning directly from a breakfast talking with the government around how we can actually do trilateral innovation between Botswana, Kenya, and the UK to learn from each other on renewable energy. And it's also about supporting Botswana's democratic foundations, which are incredibly strong, incredibly robust. The world saw the
elections,
the beautiful transition, if I can put it that way, and that is a strong foundation for economic growth. Because what do investors like? They like stability. What does democracy bring? Stability. And to witness that transition after 58 years of one party was amazing. Was a privilege. So it's delivering mutual economic growth, and there's lots of strands of activity within that. The second is around that my second point that I made about sort of the things I've really sort of taken from my first 8 months here, which is this protecting the natural environment. We all share, wherever you're from in the world, one key challenge, which is the impact of climate change. It's impacting all of us.
Everybody.
It will impact our children and our children's children. And so the collaborating together and learning on climate and nature is something which is core to our activity here. And that's about supporting sustainable management of natural resources. By that, the delta, the water systems, the beauty that is before everyone's eyes here in terms of the landscape. And it's also about supporting the clean energy transition. His Excellency the President and his government have spoken very articulately about this ambition to become a renewable energy hub by 2030. That's something we're really interested in supporting, sharing expertise and bringing in private sector investment to support that ambition. The third area is around deepening our security partnership. I spoke about Botswana's democratic credentials. Of course, a sort of well-functioning security sector is an important part of any democracy. We have deep links within the security sector, and using technology and innovation to support that. For example, in the realms of cybercrime. So we've been recently, not to get too much into the detail, but we've recently been supporting government on cyber expertise to how to support Botswana, how it would respond in the event of cyber attacks. You only need to turn on the TV, right? Everyone's heard of phishing and sort of having their details hacked.
When that happens, more and more complex now.
You see it in the UK. There's some very big UK brands that have just been in the news for being hacked. So, when I say security, sometimes people tend to think of the military or the police. Or the police we've been working very closely with to develop child-friendly justice, the child-friendly justice system here, which is a really, really important and really interesting area as well. So, mutual economic growth, climate and nature, and then the security partnership. And then underneath that, we've got our consular work, which is our support to British nationals, delivering consular services, which is really important. And then, like anything else, we're an organisation, company, so we need to run ourselves. So what we call our platform, operations, like you run a house, you need to, run an embassy, run a high commission, run our facility. So we have a small team that do that as well, that enable to support our activity. But yeah, so those three are sort of three key pillars here in Botswana, and of course within those pillars, there's also our work to SADC, because of course
yes, because you also sit you represent
exactly
the SADC office,
exactly. But we can get into any of the detail of those.
Absolutely,
if that's
just
helpful.
On a lighter note, how do you still have a large population of UK expatriates? I know that we, because of the long relationships we've had with the UK, most of the expat population were actually from a British background. Is that still the case? I'm sure you monitor the numbers and the declines. And
so interestingly, it's actually quite hard to know exactly how many.
Oh, really?
Because we no longer have a system where people sort of register as such, where they formally register to say I've got a British passport, I live here. So we work on kind of estimates.
Okay.
But not that many, not as many as you think. I mean, we think anywhere between 5 and 10,000. But as I say, if a Brit sort of doesn't get in trouble, if they don't come and ask us for something, we don't have actually a system that sort of tracks British nationals. But we think, that's quite a range between 5 and 10,000. But but that's where we are. Yeah. But you're right. There are deep links of Brits who've been here a long time.
A long time, yeah. Some have naturalized even, isn't it? Some
exactly.
For a couple of generations that have been here. Yeah, Giles, when we agreed to do this podcast, I did reflect on the role of a country like the UK, and selfishly I was like, we come so far with the UK as the former colonizer and working together. A lot of us, I understand most of our budget when we were getting independence in 1966 was coming from the UK, but this country has had its struggles. And I'm glad you mentioned the economic front and the technology front, because Botswana perhaps has never been in a more precarious situation like now from an economic perspective, what's happening with diamonds. But the diversification story is not new. It comes from 30 years. Some of us have been listening to the music of diversification for a long time. So the question is, with all the good stuff that you intend to do, I might ask, what's going to be different? Because the countries that we've got partnership, but the countries have still gone, and I know that I've always said, in the end, I got to be fair to UK, because you got Kenya, you got India, you got all these Commonwealth countries that probably asking for the same thing, and it might be a bit unfair. But the country, I've always seen Botswana as such a high potential opportunity, especially from the basic peace and democratic credentials. So why don't a country like UK just say, we're going to show that it can happen in Africa by supporting a country that's ticking most of the boxes? You know what I mean? But if you look at the indicators, Botswana is losing ground in a number of areas. So the ones that worry me is obviously on the social side, because we generally being good, warm people, and we're losing that because of some modernization aspects. But the economy is the most calling one at the moment. I just wanted to appreciate. Do you sense this is a sense of, is it going to be different? Is it going to make sustained impact this time around? Because diversification we've always cried, and we've always had you guys around here, but the story has always been the same.
It's a fantastic question. And I'll be a real diplomat and recall a quote of one of my former ambassadors who looked at me one day as I was trying to ask a question. He said, Giles, you're a diplomat, not a soothsayer. Your job is not to predict the future.
Yeah.
But will it be different this time around? I don't know. And that's not my place to judge whether things will be different. What it is my place to do is to get the partnership in a place where we can give the most support to give the vision of the new government the best chance. We've sent some really clear signals already about that, about why we're serious.
Okay.
At a political level, we had soon after the inauguration, our Minister for Africa, Lord Collins, spent 3 days in Botswana having discussions at the highest level about how we can develop the partnership. That was followed very quickly afterwards by our Minister for Trade, who was here looking particularly at how we can increase trade and investment between our two countries. We have duty-free and quota-free access for Botswana goods into the UK. We want to make more of that, so we get more trade flows between our two countries.
Opening up our exports.
Opening up our exports, exactly. We've got programs in place to help facilitate that, support exporters. So as a sort of very sort of quick, immediate response. The response from the government was very strong in terms of at a political level. It's a great privilege. Next week will be, and there was a press release about it actually, so it's in the public domain. His Excellency the Vice President will be visiting the UK. Over the next couple of weeks, we have a number of Botswana ministers coming to the UK. We have a team from the Attorney General's office. We have the Minister of Higher and Lower Education, the Minister of Health. As I said, the Vice President coming next week. So, these are not visits for visits' sakes. These are visits with clear agendas, with deliverables to, at its core, to support this effort of economic diversification. As you rightly say, against an increasingly difficult backdrop and a difficult fiscal situation. I think, I've listened to some of your past podcasts that go into this in detail, from which I've learnt a lot. So the trick for us, together in partnership with the government of Botswana, not just the government, with a whole range of stakeholders here, civil society, private sector, is to say, what are the partnerships that we can really sort of 10x.
Yeah.
Which partnerships can we 10x to have the most impact on supporting the vision that His Excellency the President has set out around economic diversification. One of those areas we think we could be particularly impactful is renewable energy. I think that's something that's very, very exciting. And as the UK, we've been through our own transition. We can bring expertise. There's a lot of excitement from investors.
Oh, really? Already.
The Vice President will be meeting some of our biggest investors in the City of London next week. And the purpose of that is to hear directly from the Vice President and to understand the sectors, the areas, the projects that the private sector can engage in. So will it be different this time around? I think looking forward, as I say, the question is, how can the UK bring to bear breadth of the relationship we have with Botswana? I mean, it's phenomenal.
It's phenomenal. It's very deep, of course.
Maybe I should sort of expose a little here. As a High Commissioner, you probably think, listeners might think, I know everything that the UK is doing in Botswana. But I don't, because of course, we are a conduit for UK support, whether it's in education, in energy, on the security front, whether it's in TV and film. But of course, the connections between our countries are thick and fast, and so I am constantly discovering new areas which we can help as the High Commission. We can help to sort of supersize, to 10x, to unlock further opportunities. But going back to what is it we do? look, we can't just do a little bit of everything all the time.
That's true.
We have to find those areas of cooperation that we agree on between ourselves, between the UK government and the Botswana government, to really say, okay, these are the things we really want to go after. I mean, one of the things that's resonated very clearly is the new government's approach to having a human rights centered set of policies, foreign policy, domestic policy, and that's something which is is extremely welcome. And we've had discussions around between us around how can the UK share its own experience of these challenges, and the tone of the relationship is really important. The tone of the UK here is not one of a paternalistic tone. It's not one of finger wagging. It's one to say, we are where we are. We have a deep experience between our two countries. How can we work together in partnership? How can we learn from each other to support you and create connections? So I think I've answered your question.
Yeah, you've tried. But a bit of diplomatic way. But anyway, just as a follow up, Giles, as a High Commissioner in Botswana, and then you've talked about the role of government, the trade missions, the cooperation, the policies. I'm from the private sector, as you're aware, and we pick up our own issues. We always wonder how to position them such that they can be taken up as well. As an example, the level of inequality in Botswana has troubled me for many years. I've raised it with authorities with not much traction. So what I did, I said, what are the development partners here in Botswana? So I visited the World Bank office locally. I visited the UN rep to say, why, the divisive and corrosive impact of and long term, it actually destroys a country in the long term. But there doesn't seem to be an urgency even from development partners. They gave me quite a diplomatic response as well to say, just to summarize without quoting them too much, they said what they can do is much as is related to the appetite of the recipient. I'm sure you're getting me. Yeah. So my question is, if I'm a citizen like me, private sector, and I know that there's a little fire that's burning, and I want to position, and I'm not just talking about the UK embassy. Is it something that you are open to it, to be able to approach an embassy and say, and I know partly, that's why we're here as well, to see how you position that. Is that a fair question?
Yeah, no, it is a fair question. I'm just looking into your light whilst I think it through. You're right. People often say to me that Botswana is caught in what they term a kind of upper middle income trap. Yeah. What that means is your GDP per capita is higher than South Africa.
Correct.
So on paper, very rich country. Yeah. But
on the ground,
on the ground, the difference between the rich and the poor is extreme. I mean, the responses you would have heard from some of my colleagues will be right in the sense that one of the sort of first principles of what we do is you have to be asked to do something. Wade into a country and say we're going to solve inequality. It has to be in response to the government. I know that the next it's the NDP National Development Plan 12 is under sort of draftsmanship at the moment, and that is something we'll look to say, okay, how can we support this issue of inequality? Because you're right, it's something that everyone talks about. And there's probably areas where I think we could deepen our partnership on inequality. One of the things where we are working on it quite, and because you can come at inequality from so many different ways. Yeah. Right? You can say inclusive growth. Yeah. How do you have inclusive growth? It's one of the big challenges that many economies around the world face. But one really sort of tangible example that I like to give is one of partnership between the government here, the Ministry of Education, Oxford University, and their local partners on the ground through what's called the What Works Hub, which is a fantastic program implemented by YouthWorks here, and Youth Impact. Youth Impact. And what they do is it's very simple. It's an hour a day in primary school. It's a class an hour a day. By the end of this year, I understand they'll be in every primary school in the country. And what this does is it uses A/B testing, which is a rapid form of learning as you go in terms of how you teach children math and English, principally. It's an hour a day in every school in the country by the end of the year. At the moment, there are 9 out of 10 provinces. And the impact of that is incredible because it's basically making children learn maths and English quicker and better. And I know that one of the concerns is the sort of education outcomes and the impact that has on equality. I mean, and particularly amongst the girl child, the impact of not having the right education and has on inequality. So that's sort of one example. And it's a good example because it's bringing in UK expertise from Oxford University, from what's called the What Works Hub. It's in partnership with the government, the ministry, and with the local NGO on the ground, Youth Impact. And that will necessarily have an impact on inequality. But as I say, you need that national framework to tackle it. And that's something we look forward to, the NDP 12, seeing how we can work more deliberately on it, because it's not a 1 year, 2 year, 5 year plan. It's a very, very long term issue. But it's something we're very aware of and very open to having a conversation around how we can, through that umbrella of mutual economic growth, you need to address inequality rather. To have that. Because you won't get inclusive growth without doing it.
Absolutely. And partly, I don't know if you've answered this one, is apart from those type of initiatives, is an NGO, for instance, sitting in Botswana with a particular burning thing, can they approach the embassy and say, and present something? Is that, or it's got to be a request through government? I'm just trying to see how you interact, your interface with the country, apart from the Minister of Finance, President, and so forth.
So we do. So because Botswana is an upper middle income country, it doesn't have significant amounts of what we call overseas development assistance available to it. So I like to sort of frame the UK as a partner, a partnership. We are, but not necessarily a development partner. Because I think that speaks to what in some instances is a sort of outdated relationship of sort of donor-recipient, which can lead to the wrong sort of partnership, I think. And so that's why we talk about a partnership of equality. We do have money. We are spending significant amounts of money here. They generally come through what we call centrally managed programs, which are programs that are conceived regionally in combination with regional governments. So it's more at a structural level. So we don't operate really anymore. And I think high commissions and embassies used to do this in the past, where you can sort of knock on the door and say, "I've got this project. Can you fund it?" As a high commission, that's not our modus operandi. What we do try and do is try and link people and organisations together, expertise, private sector, think tanks, universities, that with them bring financing and can create collaborations and partnerships. We're working more in that space. And I think you will see the kind of wider sort of development architecture globally moving in more of that space, finding innovative partnerships between a range of actors to address these issues, rather than it sort of traditionally being, okay, we've got this problem, fund this project. So that's how we're working increasingly in Botswana.
Right. Going back to the partnership, is there anything else that you'd like to highlight from the partnerships that here in terms of initiatives that we have for Botswana, apart from the ones that you've mentioned?
Gosh, I've got so I'm looking at my crib sheets here, and we've got so many lines.
Just highlights.
So I think one of the ones which I haven't mentioned, which is really really important, is our support on law reform. This was mentioned in part.
Law reform.
Okay. This is a good example to your listeners of where you can have a catalytic impact. so we've got a team from the Attorney General's office going to the UK, and this is about we have our own law reform unit in the UK.
Oh, permanent units that just looks at
looking at law reform, and it's a really important issue because it can be catalytic.
Yeah,
making sure you've got the right legislative framework to enable businesses, to enable development. Yeah. And I just choose that as a good example because it's bringing expertise with not the huge amount of financing, but you don't necessarily need huge amounts of financing because this is about
that one,
sharing expertise, sharing understanding, and working together.
Yeah.
So I think that's one area I'd support.
That will deal with this doing business in Botswana aspect that also has been quite difficult to crack in terms of regulations and policies just built so much. We usually say as well when we joke, it's like we adopted this bureaucracy from the UK. Yeah. But they've moved from the bureaucracy, but we're still stuck with it.
Yeah, exactly. That will be one of the things. I mean, it'll work on law reform. Can be any law, right?
Yeah.
But that's been one of the areas that's highlighted about cutting through the kind of red tape to make it easier to do business. And I've been really open with the government here to say that Botswana is a fantastic investment destination. But what private sector investors tell me is that it's brilliant, but it's too slow.
Yeah.
So how can we make it? How can we speed things up? So I think that's one area that I'd like to highlight. The other area is around financing. We have something called UK export financing.
Okay.
UKEF. And what that is a credit agency, an export credit agency, which has a credit line for Botswana of £5 billion plus.
Really?
And that's around providing financing on favourable terms to support the sorts of projects that you would have heard His Excellency the Vice President and Finance Minister set out very eloquently in his first budget speech. So we're looking forward to having further conversations around how the UK can bring financial support to those projects and programs, which will help with this issue of development, diversification, inequality. But really, I mean, the list of
trade funding, because I think that's quite important, especially trying to accelerate this export-oriented type economy. Yeah. So if someone wants to export from Botswana, does it have to be to the UK to access the funding, or it's based on the business case? Even if you are exporting to Switzerland or to the States, does it matter? No.
So export finance. What export finance is financing for primarily sort of infrastructure projects here. So whether it's new hospitals or new roads, we can offer financing to those government-to-government financing to those projects. But only 20% of the goods and services for that project have to come from the UK. The rest can come from elsewhere.
All right.
So, and we can also help source the providers of those goods and services. So it's we're at the sort of early conversations with the government on this facility, but I'm hopeful we can find ways in which we can provide and do deals around financing for some of these really important infrastructure projects. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, I know you want to exhaust all of them, so let's hope that one way or the other you'll find a way of be able to highlight, because this looks very exciting and appetizing. And as you might know, then the people need to know about them, or obviously interfacing with government all the time I mean, one other one, and it's interesting in this context, people would have read a lot about the reduction of global funding for development. Yeah. People would have seen that. You need to turn on the news. Especially if you are increasing your defense budgets. Exactly. That's what I was like. When I read that, I was like, your prime minister, when he's saying, this percentage up, and it's like, is the developing world that's going to suffer, because you got to rob Peter to pay Paul somehow, isn't it? Yeah. So, I mean, let me address that head on. So the UK has gone from 0.7, then 0.5 to 0, a target of 0.3 of our GDP on overseas development assistance. The Prime Minister took that decision not based on an ideological standpoint, but based on a clear and present threat that we face on the borders of Europe from Russia, from their illegal invasion, continued aggression of Ukraine. And
in order to shore up our security and the security of Europe, we need to spend more on defence. That is the harsh reality. We remain as committed to international development as we ever have, and that's why the impetus on people like me and my High Commission is to find ways in which we can find innovative partnerships to what we call blend financing, as in using the sort of UK platform to bring in expertise that then can attract additional funds. I mean, a very good example is the product of the recent deal on mining deal on diamonds with De Beers, and the government, the Diamonds for Development Fund, which I know, the initial tranche is going to be, I think, $75 million or so, and then more tranches every year based on profits. What we're trying to do and really keen to do is say, well, how can we bring in UK expertise on development, whether it's in renewables, whether it's in education, whether it's on health, to support the impact of that fund. So that's a really good example of doing development differently. In response to what's happened in the sort of global development funding pot. You've got two options. You can sort of put your head in your hands and despair, or you can say, okay, actually, we're going to use our expertise, our deep knowledge, to find new innovative ways to support development assistance to address inequality. And that's a really, I think, difficult but exciting challenge. And there's real opportunities in Botswana with that particular fund, the Diamonds for Development Fund, which we're really interested to cooperate on.
Excellent. Cool. You're good with the partnerships, with the initiatives. We can move on.
We can. Yeah, we can move. We can move on.
You want to squeeze another one?
I do. Do I want to squeeze another one?
But I like this one of skills because one of the challenges with Botswana in the past was the issue of work permits and allowing expertise and talent to come in. And like you said, apart from the funding that has been deteriorating and coming down, another way is just to bring skills. Like as an example. A lot of our boards of directors of SOEs or even private, we had a localization program. And it meant, as we talk about diversity, a lot of them now gets meant, and there's no word like women, gets meant by people who went to the same schools, are local. So it affects the level of innovation. And as I said, there must be some retired UK special in that area that has been at it for 50 years. So it should be able to come in and help, whether it's the board or just technical secondment, where they come in and stay here in a warmer weather for a year. That type of thing. I don't think that has been very optimally used, so to speak.
No, I think that's an interesting area of cooperation. I mean, more broadly, one of the other areas that we're really keen to explore is TVET, technical. Technical vocational educational training. So the ministers of education will be in the UK, and this is one of the things they're specifically looking at, particularly in the kind of digital and technology space, how we have our sort of technical colleges and what they're doing and how they're putting new relevant talent into the job. Because I think that's the challenge. That's been the challenge in Botswana, and has also been the challenge in the UK to an extent, which is making sure you've got graduates with the right skills for what the economy needs. And for example, we've one of the exciting program we have with a college in Cardiff and the Botswana Power Corporation is a TVET training program on solar installation. Which will be the first of its kind.
Excellent.
And there's all sorts of collaborations. And of course, it's not about its development, but it's also business. Because these are schools, and there'll be contracts, and there'll be payments, and it's this is what I talk about. It's about win-win. It's not about handouts. It's not about the UK coming in and saying this is what we want to.
Big brother type attitude.
It's about look, come to the UK, see our colleges. What's of interest? Let's help facilitate. Facilitate that support. So I think that exchange of education and that exchange of sort of training is really important and something where I think we can add real value.
Cool. Giles, as we come towards the end, the big question is, we touched on this a little bit pre-podcast about we don't just see, Great Britain, UK, whatever you want to call it, as just the partner from an embassy point of view. There's a very long history between Botswana and the UK, going back to when we went to ask for protection in the 19th century with the three chiefs, and helping at the at 1965-66 when we got independence in terms of funding the country, and there is also the legacy of colonization, which is obviously a very debatable issue. And I just wanted to ask you this question, which is a good journey towards the end, as to, is this something that ever arises in your diplomatic deliberations about the legacy of countries like Botswana that you colonized for many years, with negative and positive? Because people always say schools were built. There were some positive aspects in terms of development agenda, but there are also some negative things that people always say we are like this because we were colonized. Is it something that that in terms of the legacy you also build into the formula to say we need to mitigate against those negative perceptions for something that even people in those countries, because I know it's not just Botswana, can look back at?
I think it's an excellent question. And I think, understanding the past is a really important part of informing how we build the partnership with Botswana going forward. I think that's really, really important. And that's why I think inclusive conversations with, partners in Botswana or elsewhere on understanding those legacies of the past. They're unique in every country, and how we can take that understanding to tackle the future challenges of today, whether it's on security, whether it's on growth, whether it's on education, and building that partnership for the future. I think it's really important to recognise that history, that in some countries very difficult history, and to have an open conversation about it. And I'm very open to doing that. And I actually had a question about this on a radio show not so long ago. And I think it's we are where we are now, and we are looking forward, and we want to work in partnership to create the best future. In order to do that, you do need to understand the past and have a conversation about it. It's not an issue that has been raised with me many times, I have to say, indirectly since I've arrived. But it's not something that I shy away from. And I'd be very interested from whether it's from the university or whether it's from civil society about the value in those conversations, how to have those conversations, what's the best way to do it in a sort of safe and inclusive way. Because as going back to the sort of very first question, which is what are we here for? What is a diplomat? We're a bridge of understanding. You can't just be a bridge of understanding on the easy issues. Correct. Right? It's important to be a bridge of understanding on the difficulty, on the difficult issues, because that informs your future. So I think that's what I'd say on that issue, which is a really, really important.
It's an open, cool. What excites you about the future now in terms of Botswana and the UK? Just on the final part of the podcast, what do you look forward to? By the way, how long is your tenure?
4 years.
It's 4. So you're going to be around for quite a while. Yeah.
There's a renewed sense of energy, enthusiasm, and dynamism into what is a very old and deep relationship, which I felt perhaps hadn't had the political attention from either side that it might have done in the past. And I get this. There's a real sort of energy around what we can do together, and how we can work together in partnership, what the UK can learn, what Botswana can learn. That's really exciting for me. Like at a sort of high level, just bringing that engagement and that enthusiasm and that understanding of the country to the UK, and bringing the sort of skills and the expertise to forge exciting, interesting collaborations, whether it's in education, whether it's in renewable energy, whether it's in tech, whether it's investors coming here. I think there's amazing opportunity in this country, and it's a real privilege to be a part of that bridge to help leverage that opportunity for both of our citizens from Botswana and from the UK. So that that really really excites me, and to do it in a peaceful and democratic and beautiful country is a real privilege, and I look forward to getting stuck in, as they say.
No, excellent. No, thanks very much, Giles. I look forward to us meeting again in a year and saying, this is the progress that we've made. This is what we've cracked.
Absolutely. I look forward to that because it's not just about sort of cocktail parties and canapes. It's about delivery.
And expensive whiskies.
and my Prime Minister and my Foreign Secretary are very clear on that. This is about clear deliverables that support mutual economic growth.
That's fantastic.
And that's what I'll be held to account to, and look forward to coming back in the future and talking about the kind of the progress that we're making together as partners.
Excellent, Giles. Just on a last final note, is there any book, anything that you'd like to share with our readers that has really made good impact in your life, whether it's a book or something that you'd like to share on a final note? People always have these sort of books or stories or even a podcast that you've watched and like, have a look at that.
Gosh, do you know what? There's so many, and I'm not going to pick out one, but one thing I will pick out, and it goes to your listeners, is I got into podcasts in 2018 when I lived in Thailand for a short period. And that I noticed on your bookshelf, you had something that was around 10x, how to 10x something.
Yeah.
I think podcasts are a great way of sort of 10xing your learning.
Yeah.
I grew up with quite bad learning difficulties.
Okay.
I was really acutely dyslexic. I didn't learn to read till I was 10.
Oh, shame.
And I wish I'd had podcasts then. My parents used to record stories and maths on old audio tapes for me to listen back to.
Oh.
So what I didn't realize is my parents were actually helping me learn through podcasts when I was at primary school, but they were these old tapes. So I think I would say that I'm excited by the way learning's changing, and learning is becoming much more accessible to people with all sorts of backgrounds. Get into more podcasts.
No, great stuff. No, thanks, Giles. Thanks for opening up and sharing this long-held perception about diplomats and foreign relations. So I think it's been very helpful to you, hopefully, and I hope you learned a lot. If you have a son, a daughter that wants a career, hopefully this has been very helpful. So see you next time, and out of here. Thanks, Giles.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Cool.
Goodbye.